The University of Manitoba is bringing a taste of South America to their Centre for Creative Writing and Oral Culture. The school has brought in an Ecuadorian writer to serve as writer-in-residence for winter 2024. A writer-in-residence programme brings together established and emerging writers and storytellers, and it offers workshops, one-on-one consultations and public events. The programme's been running for over 15 years at the U of M. Miguel Antonio Chávez is from Guayaquil, Ecuador, also known as a gateway to the Galapagos Islands, and this is his first ever residency. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
So what excites you about being the new writer in residence at the University of Manitoba?
Well, first of all, being a writer in residence. The experience of, knowing a different place in which I could develop my own creative narrative project in which I am on. And also the possibility of teaching, right? Because it's the only thing that I love the most besides writing. And this residence specifically asks, applicants to propose some kind of teaching experience for students. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Miguel, I want to get to know you a bit more. You're from Ecuador.
Yes.
Many of us have never been there before. What was it like growing up in Ecuador?
It was interesting. It was interesting, at least in the years I lived. The moment I lived, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, basically, because I spent my childhood and my teen years. And I went abroad a few times, but I hadn't considered the possibility of being away from my country for years. But I did it from the moment I started to study abroad. So being a student made me that possibility. But on the other side, growing in places like Ecuador or other countries of Latin America, it's like, for example, you have this awareness of, growing up with your friends, with your family. Maybe those ties are like tighter there in these countries. The food also of course, is also delicious, and the nature. My country has a very beautiful nature.
Yeah.
And still does have it, and I'm proud of that.
How did your culture influence your writing and what you write about?
Perhaps the places in which I grew up in. I have written a few things about my home city, and as anyone that lives in a city, you have your own love-hate relationship with your own city, right? So that love-hate relationship, I think it's a motor for creating.
You talked about some of the things you loved about Ecuador, right? What were some of the things?
I love and I hate the most, so I put it in a blender.
Yeah,
and ideas come up.
What are some of the challenging things about growing up in Ecuador?
Challenging things, perhaps. What has been very evident through decades is that social inequality somehow. Yeah. That you see very, very rich people and very, very poor people. But I think that the access for education, the access for many basic services, like, water or electricity. And, when I grew up, there was delinquency, but not in the way that it is right now, because the situation has gone completely nuts, completely out of control. It's so sad to say that.
Yeah. And
sometimes I feel angry and sad at the same time, because of this, basically the narco cartels and the consequences of that in society. So it's another kind of violence. I think the new generations are growing up with different kind of violence, which I grew up in the first place. So I think that living in a city in which you have to know, I didn't grow up with many kinds of privileges in my family. So I have like a regular middle class guy, but that allowed me to know people that were, some perhaps upper middle class and lower middle class, and both were my friends.
Yeah.
So it's like I was trying to understand, and then when I knew other part of my family, which was more upper middle class, I could not see, okay, these are the difference of society, and I knew that. And actually, perhaps other things that I don't know, as happens in some countries in which you have diversity, some ethnicities differences. Sometimes, sadly, in my country, those ethnic differences also has a consequence in this you place in your society.
Right.
So the access again to education, or for example, let's having just a single example. Being a black person in Ecuador is like, okay, or a way to become wealthy. It's like, I don't know, becoming a soccer player, any kind of professional sportsman, or I don't know, or I'm talking about the legal stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because now many people are thinking that all the illegal stuff is a quick way of going up in the ladder of society, and I think this false image of classism that is very, very latent in countries like myself, like the one I come from, in which that they sell you this imaginary that in order to be successful you have to achieve such and such material stuff. So it's funny because it happens in countries like this, but in countries which are in ways of developing or underdeveloped countries, or other people say. I don't want to call it third world because it's too pejorative, but sometimes I use it to mock myself. Those countries is that as you are, your possibilities of getting those kinds of things are more distant than here. Mm-hmm. They sell you that model that you have to have those things. That's why many people I knew in middle class that they, I don't know, had fancy cars or things that they could hardly purchase, manage to have, but they did it because they want to socially like have a social ascending.
Yep. An image that they want to project.
And some people, they were totally on debt, but they had to have this kind of I don't know, making believe. So I saw that, and I think that kind of hypocrisy I never liked that.
Yeah.
Never liked that. So it's a complex situation. I think that the differences in places like my country are more perhaps evident.
Yeah.
And visible. Yes.
Your first language is Spanish, and you
Yes.
write in Spanish. You're now in the process of translating some of your short stories from Spanish into English. What is
Yes.
that like for you?
It's odd. At first, I was afraid. I was petrified, like the song says. I have translated other people as well.
Yeah.
I actually translated a novel. It was a very interesting work I did a few years back. But when now translating myself, it's like, well, I cannot say I'm properly translating because sometimes I cheat because I find that some phrases, some kinds of structures or images that I find in English are different from the ones I find in Spanish, and perhaps that beat may change a bit the story, but like little flavor of story. But that's cool because it's although I think I've been like faithful to my translation somehow, but I came to realize that I don't have to be too rigid from translating myself. So if I change a few things, it's like when you are with another author, you have to be more. Okay, no, this is other people's text. I cannot, mess up with this.
Right, you have feel more responsible
Yeah,
for
so
other people's
here,
writing.
here I can be more flexible, and yes, I'm trying to do that. And I think the best part is when I give that text to read to someone else. Please let me know, how this can be improved. If there's a grammar structure that is incorrect, or I try to do it as best as I can. But sometimes I know I make mistakes in very basic grammar structures. Although I think they are good and I sound good, I know that there is a difference between the colloquial language in which we're talking right now, or perhaps if I write a blog, some basic article. But when you're dealing with literary language,
Yeah.
you're dealing with languages with have many levels, and sometimes you have to. For me, it's like a game of showing and concealing. And when you write, at least when I write my fiction stories, I know that I show a few things, but I have to conceal others to make it more interesting and to make the reader participate in that imagination process. Because if I, give all the clues, you cannot solve the mystery.
Very cool analogy. So it's interesting talking about translating, because you've also been delivering these workshops at the U of M
Yes.
in English and in Spanish.
Yes.
What was that like for you? Do you find that depending on the language that you are speaking, what kind of difference does that make to the actual workshop?
Well, it's interesting because that was a challenge in which I delved into. I did it on purpose because I wanted to experience this. Actually, this is my first time ever. I'm facilitating a creative writing workshop in English. So I lived that
Good for
experience.
you.
Yeah. It was really interesting because I have done it many times in Spanish, mostly in my home country, but also I did it abroad. And but now English is not well. It's the resources that I send them through email or by printing, but also the when you create like a dialogue in the group, and they try to read each other, because I tell them, okay, we have to be writers, but we have to be readers at the same time, readers of ourselves. So trying to do that in English, it's of course it's a challenge for me, but I take it as an interesting thing to do, because I'm not only I'm improving my English as a reader, but also it's not in the way when you translate things. It's like you are thinking in language. So when when I read, I try to read thinking from English, not translated to English, which is different. So it's helped me a lot to improve myself, and when I see their feedback, when I see the way they talk to me, and okay, I think it's working. So it's the same way I'm going to apply it for my new workshop, which is going to be in Spanish, beginning next week.
Miguel, thank you so much for your time today, and welcome
Thank you
to
so
Winnipeg.
much, Nadia, for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest breaking news and top stories, download the CBC News app.